Eat, sleep, bet, repeat. That's how we get down on the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and today we're going to be talking a little NFL draft action. So I got my two dudes coming over here from FantasyGuru.com, two of the guys doing a lot of our draft prep, draft coverage over there for anybody who's been reading all these articles. My man, who I'm going to say his name right for the first time ever, Tyler Beaker, as well as my boy, Armando Marçal. What's going on here today, boys?
What's up, Benny?
What's
Happy
good,
to be
man?
here.
Yep,
So-
it's
Yeah,
fun
so
to
I
be here
mean,
talking NFL.
listen, here's the way I figure let's just have a little bit of fun with this today, right? The draft starts tomorrow. We're going to kind of go through some of the draft stuff. We're going to do it with a little bit of an edge towards the sports betting side, which Tyler just told me this morning, which I think is crazy, is that Pennsylvania's not offering people to bet on the draft, right? Is that true?
Correct. DraftKings and FanDuel, and they're not allowing it now. I believe it's the Pennsylvania Sports Betting Committee has ruled the NFL draft not a actual sporting event, quote unquote. Frustrating.
Listen, I live in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, we're allowed to bet on all this shit. If you're in Vegas, you can get bets down on this. And even if you are in Pennsylvania and you really want to get some money down on this, there's a whole bunch of offshore books that are letting you bet on it. So, Armando, here's the thing that I wanted to talk about, though, because we were talking about this a little bit before we came on the air. One of the things that I think people need to understand if you're going to bet on the NFL draft is you want to look at every possible sports book that you have any kind of connection to right now, because the odds are all over the place on these.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. We talked a little bit about that before we got on live, and you have to find the best numbers. You just always have to shop around, and this is just not only for NFL draft. I mean, anytime you bet, you got to shop around and look for the better numbers, because there's edge to that. When you get better numbers, you can make more money and risk less. That's just the bottom line. It's that easy, that simple. So I've talked about how many running backs I would like to come off the board in round one, and I looked at the sportsbook, DraftKings sportsbooks, and I really don't like their numbers. So if I really want to bet that, I'm going to shop that around before placing a bet on them.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know what? You mentioned it, so let's start right there. Let me ask this question to you, Tyler. We'll start with you. Who's your favorite running back in this draft? And actually, I shouldn't even say who's your favorite running back in this draft, because I think the answer to this question is basically two guys. So who do you like better between Swift or Taylor?
I think Jonathan Taylor is a much better prospect. I think the fantasy industry is very separate from the NFL industry in terms of who they believe. I think most people there think DeAndre Swift is the superior prospect. So I think the better odds are to pursue Swift if you're trying to go which RB comes first off the board. But long term, I think Taylor is the better prospect that I'd rather invest in. As far as like which one could go in round one, I don't think either do, honestly. I think we see them wait till round two.
Yeah, and that's a really good point right there. I mean, the number for running backs drafted in the first round is 0.5. So you're basically saying will or will not a running back be drafted in the first round is kind of the question that they're asking here. And I kind of agree with you. I think the fantasy community and the actual football community are very split on who the best running back in this draft is. Swift is the kind of guy who could be a fantasy stud because he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He runs well enough between the tackles that he'll pick up some yards there as well. But there are a lot of teams that do like Taylor more. So, Armando, you brought it up. So let me ask you the question. If you're going to go drop a bet on it right now, I think it's actually like minus 160 that one doesn't get drafted. And I think you're getting plus money that there is one drafted in the first round. Does a running back go in the first round of this draft?
I think we could see as much as two go in the first round, to be honest with you, just because of the teams that are picking in the back and some of their needs. So I would bet the over, honestly. I think these two running backs, Taylor and Swift, are both, round one material. They just both have that, caliber where they can be an every down back in the NFL for a very long time. I think Swift is the better one of the two just because I think he's more NFL ready. But I agree with Tyler. I do think Taylor has the higher upside and maybe the bigger ceiling of the two.
Yeah, so there you go. For all the running backs don't matter people out there, they're going to have their money on the under 0.5. And those of us who think that running backs may matter, I mean, hey, we only really need one of them to get drafted. I got to be honest with you guys, this is one that I've kind of stayed away from because I definitely don't think either one of them is going early. If one of them gets drafted, it's like pick 26, 27, 28, somewhere towards the back end of the round where You're going to have to wait till basically the end of the draft coverage to find out whether or not, that one pays off. So let's start right from the beginning now. Let's jump back to the beginning here. I want to talk about quarterbacks a little bit here. Does anybody not think Joe Burrow goes number one? Let's start there. Minus 100. He is literally
stunned, to be honest.
Minus 10,000 to 1 to be picked first on FanDuel. And I think it's like minus 8,000 to 1 on DraftKings right there. So basically, if you got 10,000 lying around and you want to try to win $100, it's pretty good, right? Like is everybody in agreement here that he's going first?
Yeah, it's the worst kept secret in the NFL that Burrow's going number 1 to Cincinnati.
All right, so you know what? He's going to be the first quarterback off the board. Second pick, Washington Redskins. I think this is going to be Chase Young, and I think a lot of other people do as well. Anybody have any disagreements or even any, concern about that happening? And again, the numbers you're getting on that one, he's like minus 5,000 to be the pick for the Redskins, and like minus 10,000 to be the first offensive player off the board. So, I mean, basically you look at the odds and they're giving us like an 80-90% chance of happening as well. Actually, technically at that number, it's more like a 95% chance of happening. But everybody agrees he's going number 2?
Yeah, I think that's a strong chance that he goes number 2. Do you think the Redskins could go another way? Like, do you think they're going to do – I mean, it's the Redskins, for Christ's sake. So if they do, I think they'd go with someone like Tua. I know they invested in a quarterback last year, but I just think his stock has come up. And I don't – I'm not going to say that they were impressed with what they saw with Haskins. So I would not be surprised. But I think they go defense here 99.9%.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. We did see a report come out this morning that Washington is in talks with somebody about a trade. But, I mean, considering they couldn't move Trent Williams, I don't think this is the best negotiating team in the league. I really think Dan Snyder is really inept at that. So I don't think they're moving out of number 2. And if they get Chase Young, it helps them make a really strong front seven. It's a really, really good pick there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guy is an absolute stud. If you watch any of his game tape, he just looks like an absolute beast. And, he has all the measurables and the things that NFL teams look like that, translates to the next level here. So now the third pick here is where things could get a little bit interesting. And the reason I say that is because of the quarterbacks, basically. We know that Miami and the Chargers are both in the market for a quarterback, or at least that's the consensus that most people are thinking. Detroit, who has the third pick right now, probably not taking the quarterback. The thing that I'm hearing is that they really like the cornerback, what's his name, Okuda from Ohio State. Yeah, so he's the guy who they're most likely to take if they stay in that pick. But you have to think, if the Chargers and Miami are worried about the other, if the Chargers are worried about Miami taking the guy that they want, then they're going to have to move up to 3 or 4, although I don't know if the Giants are going to trade out of that pick, although I don't really think it matters for the Giants. But they would have to move up if they're afraid that Miami, who picks before them, is going to take their quarterback. So, Armando, I'm going to start with you on this one because I know you're a Dolphins guy down in the Miami area right there. I think 2 is the better quarterback, personally. What I've seen and what I've read, for me, one of the things that translates to the NFL the most from college is accuracy, and he's a more accurate quarterback than Hebert is. But it looks to me, and from everything I'm reading and from all the smoke screens and everything going up, that Miami would rather draft Hebert. So let's say it goes Okuda 3, and then the Giants, who we'll talk about again in a minute, draft an offensive lineman, which we all know is what they're probably likely going to do at 4. Now you have both of those quarterbacks sitting there at 5 and 6 for Miami and the Chargers. What if I told you I wouldn't be surprised if they don't draft neither of the 2?
I mean, I honestly would not be shocked. They have 3 first-round picks. They have, 5 picks in the top 56. So, I like Tua. I think there's a lot of red flags with him. I really do. The injury is a big concern for me. Mm-hmm. I know this has very little to do, the statistics and stuff, but lefty quarterbacks really don't succeed in the NFL at a high percentage. And that to me is just a red flag in itself. Mm-hmm. I like Simmons a lot, and I think the Dolphins can use someone like Isaiah Simmons. And I think that's a slam dunk pick right there. And I know the Dolphin fans want a quarterback, want a franchise quarterback. I get all that. But we still have 2 other picks in the first round. And once you go away from Joe Burrow, there's a lot of red flags with some of these other quarterbacks, and there's some with pretty high upside that need work on, of course, like Jordan Love. And I would not be at all, surprised if they go defense here, because you're getting a sure thing with that 5th pick. If I'm getting a quarterback, though, it'll be Herbert. Myself, I just think that there's just less red flags than there is with Tua.
Okay, Tyler, how about you? How are you looking at that Miami pick at number 5? What do you think they're going to do?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Where we've seen more and more rumors of Herbert being tied to the Dolphins, and if they were to pick a quarterback, I think that would be the one they go with. The one concern I have if they go with like a player like Simmons would be great for Brian Flores' defense. Would be, does a team like the Patriots climb up and jump ahead of them at their 18th spot, Miami's 18th spot, to snipe another quarterback and continue Miami's despair of not getting the quarterback they're looking for? One thing I'll say is on the Chargers is I think they've made a lot of moves that indicate Tua could be their number 1 quarterback on their board. Mm-hmm. They picked up Brian Bulaga, right tackle. They picked up Trey Turner, right guard. That's the blind side for that left-handed quarterback in Tua. I think those are little breadcrumbs that could lead to him being tied to them. The Dolphins picking up a defensive player is an interesting theory. I haven't heard that talked about much, but I think a big playmaker like Simmons is hard to pass up. That's a really good point if he slips past the Giants or the Lions at 3 and 4.
See, I think Simmons is the guy who's going to fall in this draft that shouldn't. Like to me, he could be a top 5 pick, but I just think that with team needs and with the way the draft is going to unfold, like if he's available at like 9 or 10, those teams that are picking areas like the Jaguars and the Browns, I think, the phone's going to be ringing off the hook because he is a difference maker on the defensive side of the football. And it's a position that's pretty weak in this draft. Like after him, there's 1 or 2 other guys that are considered to be like possible starters, but there's no other guys that play his position that are going to wind up being stars. So right. I don't think it's crazy over there. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is it brings us to one of the first, I guess we'll call it an arbitrage situation that you kind of have here with some of the betting markets. So Tyler and I were talking about this, while we were waiting for Armando to come on here this morning. You could get Hebert being the first quarterback, or Herbert, whatever the fuck. I always call him Hebert. I look there. I know I'm probably wrong on that. But, he could be the first quarterback off the board you're getting at like plus 105, plus 110, depending on where you're looking. But you could also go to a site like FanDuel and get Tua at plus 100 to the Dolphins right there. So if you see, Armando just threw this whole thing off for me because to me, I was 100% sure Miami was taking a quarterback, and now I'm doubting myself a little bit here. But if you think Miami's going to take a quarterback, you can take, Tua at even money and then get Herbert at plus 105, and you can pretty much guarantee yourself a profit unless they do something crazy like take Isaiah Simmons. So at that point in time, I mean, there are, and this is what we said before at the beginning of the show about like shopping around on prices. You go to FanDuel and you take Tua to Miami at plus 100. You go to DraftKings, I think you're getting, Herbert, I think is even like 120 plus 120 to be the first guy off the board. You're either going to break even on your bets if Tua is the guy who goes to Miami, or you could win $20, per $100 that you bet if you go the other direction with Hebert. So this is why it's important to do that. I'm going to think if it's up to me, I mean, I think Miami, from everything I'm hearing, is going to wind up going with the quarterback. And I think people are overestimating the fact that they're going to take Tua, because if you would have got this number 2 weeks ago, this is what Tyler and I were talking about. This show's called The Opening Line. The opening line on Tua being the second quarterback off the board was minus 800. Right now, he's down to like minus 150. So you're basically talking about it being like a 90% chance to right now being like a 60% chance. That's a pretty big move. And in the betting market, again, if you had to lay $800 a month ago to win 100, right now, if you lay 800, you're winning about 400 on it. So, 500 actually is more like it. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of smoke here. But to me, if I'm going to make a bet, one of my favorite bets to make so far is taking Hebert at like plus 110, plus 120, depending on where you can get it, going to Miami with the 5th pick. So what do you guys think about that as my first big bet of the draft here?
I'm into it.
I like it.
Yeah, go ahead, Armando. You're a Miami guy.
I like it. I like it because I do think that they're going to go in that direction. If they're going to take a quarterback, I think it's going to be Herbert. I don't think they're going to go to Tua. And I've just been reading a lot of our beat writers as well down here, just suggesting the same. Some even are angry that they're going to do it, but I would take that bet for sure.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't agree with it. But again, I'm not trying to tell you guys who I think the better prospect's going to be here. We're trying to help you guys make some money on the draft right now. You know, his accuracy on uncatchable balls, the number was like 14 or 15%. That's a pretty big number. That's not something that usually translates well. That's like Jamarcus Russell kind of number. And that scares the hell out of me when you put him in the, you know, when that's one of the comps that you're looking at some of his numbers and comparing a guy like that to. Whereas Tua actually had a lower percentage of uncatchable balls than Joe Burrows did, who's very likely going to be the number 1 pick overall. So, you know, the big problem I think this year, and I think this is going to happen, I kind of want to get your opinion on this, both of you guys. Tyler, we'll start with you here. One of the problems that has come up with this whole coronavirus situation is a lot of teams weren't able to do their own medical research on these guys. You know, you didn't get a chance like you normally do to bring him in and watch him stand around in his underwear and, you know, check every little thing that, you know, people are concerned with and look at the knee and look at the shoulder and look at the elbow and stuff like that. Things that normally happen in years past in the NFL drafts. So one of the concerns I have is anybody coming into this draft with any kind of injury history, I just feel like teams are not going to want to take a chance on him. Are you of that same mindset, or do you think talent's going to win out anyway?
Aside from the quarterback position with Tua, I agree with you. I just think he's just such an elite prospect where he's shown for 3 years at Alabama that he can put up elite numbers, and his accuracy is off the charts, as you mentioned. His playmaking ability, is able to read and process plays. I just think he's such a can't-miss prospect that, I mean, we saw him work out in a quote-unquote really poorly scripted, not a pro day, but like a video that was released. I think it was Chris Mortensen that sent it out. It wasn't the best, but it did show that he wasn't stiff, that he was still able to move around and doing some drills on showing movement. I think that's at least important to see that he's recovering and on the way up. But yeah, I think by and large, though, any kind of injured player could slide down this board because we don't have medicals, we don't have pro days, we don't have that kind of information where teams are able to get as much information as they normally do.
Yeah, and there was a wide receiver, I forget the guy's name right now. He was like not one of the top wide receivers. He was in the second tier. Guy just had like an abdominal injury or something like that. They were
Brandon Ayuk. I just wrote about him on Fantasy Guru.
Yeah, they were showing him running routes and stuff like that yesterday. You know, again, another guy who arguably could have been a first-round prospect, probably going to drop now to second or third round. I mean, uber talented guy, but people were worried about, you know, where he was going to go and, you know, and all that stuff. Now, to me, after that, the quarterbacks kind of drop off the table, and it's not really all that interesting, and there's not really much we can bet on after those two. Anywhere you see Jordan Love with any of the other named quarterbacks that we mentioned, like FanDuel has a lot of these who goes off the board first, this guy or this guy. If it's Tua, if it's Herbert, or if it's Burrows, you take that side of it over Jordan Love for any amount of money. Agree or disagree?
Hard agree.
Armando, agree or disagree?
Agree.
Yeah, I think Love goes behind all those guys. So any of those, this guy or that guy things with Love in it, take the other quarterback and, you know, enjoy the money. Go buy yourself something nice with it. So now let's go back a little bit here. Let's go back to that fourth pick with the New York Giants. This is arguably what a lot of people are saying, one of the strongest drafts we've had in recent memory for offensive linemen. There are technically 4 guys who are super studs that should be drafted in the first 10, 12 picks. And then there's another half dozen guys that could wind up going towards the mid to the back end of the first round, you know, guards and other tackles and stuff like that. The Giants are taking a tackle. Okay, we're going to go out on a limb and say that because that's pretty much what everybody's been talking about here. And, you know, Daniel Jones can only get drafted once, so they're not going to go and do that again this year. So they need to get a tackle to kind of protect him. I got to be perfectly honest with you, even living in the New York area and reading all the beat writer stuff that comes out in all the newspapers and everything here, I have no clue which of these 4 guys they're going to take. So let me ask the question this way. Tyler, we'll start with you up top. Which of the big 4 offensive linemen do you think is the best? And then the second part of this question is, which of those 4 do you think the Giants think is the best?
Those are 2 really different questions there.
I asked them both because, the answers are very likely to be different.
Well, I think the NFL, as far as like mock drafts that I've seen, has done a really good job of placing those top 4 guys in that top tier. It's really clearly a top tier of Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton. I think those 4 guys could easily go in the top 15 picks.
Mhm.
As far as my preference and what I think the Giants might do, I've heard a lot of Tristan Wirfs connections there.
Mhm.
That's just based on reports and things I've read. So I'm just going off what I've read there, and I think that's a smart bet. But honestly, they're all so closely ranked. Uh, and without the medicals or anything as like a tiebreaker or anything, it's really tough to try to pinpoint one over the other. Wirfs would be my pick, but if you're trying to bet which player the Giants are going for, it's one I'm staying away from.
Armando, any lean for you on this?
No, I'm between Wirfs and Wills. Like those would be the 2 guys I would put them in getting here. But I'm with Tyler. I wouldn't if I have to pick one player, I probably wouldn't bet it. I would just be inclined to betting that they're going to take an offensive line instead. Just the position. Bet the position and not the player.
All right, so let me throw some numbers at you guys and see if I can change your minds here a little bit here. Now, I agree with Tyler. The name that I've heard the most often is actually Wirfs. The name who I think is the best offensive lineman in this draft is Wills. So, the 2 that Armando mentioned are the 2 guys that I think are there. Now, here's the thing, though. You can get first offensive lineman off the board, Wills, minus 160, minus 170, somewhere in that range, right? First offensive lineman off the board, Wirfs, plus 200. Now, even better than that, though, New York Giants to select Wirfs, plus 300. So now we're starting to talk about some serious value that's being offered in this pick. Now, again, I think Wills is the number 1 guy on the board. He's the guy who I think is the best of them all. But I agree. I keep hearing the name Wirfs being the one mentioned with the Giants. At plus 300, I put a little bit of money on that one. Crazy, not crazy? What do you guys think?
Absolutely not crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, I love those plus 300 odds. I don't think it's crazy at all.
And now everybody agrees, right? Like, let me ask this question first, because I think you both would agree with this. You think the Giants are taking an offensive lineman, right?
They're favored. They're minus 435 to take an offensive line with their first pick. So everything else is plus 600 and up. So I think it's pretty straightforward. That's one of their biggest needs too.
Yeah, and this is another one of those situations where I was talking about where you can try to do a little bit of arbitrage here. Like if you're getting 3-1 on your money for the Giants to take Wirfs on the first pick, you could even hedge a little bit of that. I know it's minus 160. You probably got to lay a little bit more than you're willing to. But I mean, if you lay 160 to win 100 on Wills, and then you bet 100 on Wirfs, if it's Wills, you break even. If it's Wirfs, you're going to wind up getting paid. You make $140 on a $100 bet. Yeah, so I kind of like the way that that's going there. So to me, that's another bet that I put in. I actually didn't hedge it yet, but now that we're talking about it here live, I may go back and do that as well because $100 on Wirfs is going to give you 400. Like I said, you put $160 on or $170, whatever you can get the odds are, minus 160, minus 170 on Wills on the other side of it. And then, you're basically saying, all right, if the Giants pick Wirfs, I win $230. If they pick Wills, I break even. So there's a lot of situations in the draft where you can do this. And again, we might even be able to find better odds. Like I only look at DraftKings and FanDuel being in New Jersey. But I mean, if you want to go look at bookmakers offering these and, Bet USA, and there's a whole bunch of other books, plus all the offshore books that are offering it too. You can definitely find some other value here that's going to go on there. All right, so let's go on there. Let's assume the Giants take one of those offensive linemen, right? And then we talked about Miami. We'll assume Miami took a quarterback. That brings us to the Chargers at 6. You kind of mentioned they went and got all these guys on the right side of the line to protect Tua's backside. Do you think Tua going 6 to the Chargers is probably the way to go? I see you shaking your head, Tyler, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, I've just been connecting these dots for so long where I almost want to will it into existence. I haven't put any money on it, but I just think it's just such a direct path of what's going on. The only thing that I would say is it's up to Miami. Do they take Tua? Could they pick him above them? Because I don't see the Giants moving back. Dave Gettleman never did that in Carolina. He always traded up, if anything, for the first round for drafts. So I don't see the Chargers leapfrogging Miami to get up to number 4. I think it solely comes down to Miami and what they do. But I think if Tua's there at number 6, he's the perfect pick for them.
So here's another interesting thing, Armando. Let me bounce this off you. Tua to be the 3rd quarterback off the board, which would mean that your Miami Dolphins take Herbert there with the 5 pick. Tua is plus money to be the 3rd quarterback off the board. So do you think Tua at plus money to be the 3rd quarterback off the board doesn't even have to be to the Chargers. They could pass on him and somebody else could take him. But would you think that's a pretty good bet there if you think that, Herbert is going to wind up on Miami?
I think that's a good bet because if the Dolphins do take a quarterback, I think it's going to be Herbert. So I think that's a really good bet, actually. And I don't know if it's going to be with the Chargers, like you said, but I think Tua would definitely be the third quarterback taken, assuming, the Dolphins go Herbert, which there's a lot of information out there that suggests that they are planning on going in that direction over Tua.
Now, and this is one of those things, this is another situation here where you got to think about the draft a little bit, right? Because you can get Herbert to Miami at plus 150, or you can get Tua being the third quarterback off the board is like plus 105 or plus 110. So if you're only making one bet on this here, if you're going to make one bet that Miami takes Herbert and Tua goes 6 overall, the best way to make money on it is just betting Herbert to be the second pick, or Herbert to be the Miami pick at plus 150. But let's say you're like really, really sure of this, like you're positive. You're like, this is exactly what Miami is going to do, which is what a lot of the mock drafts are starting to show right now. One of the problems with betting on a draft is you can't get a ton of money down, right? Like I can't put $1,000 on Herbert to be the pick. I tried. They wouldn't let me. 200 was the most I could get down on it.
Mm-hmm.
But by taking Tua at plus money as the third quarterback off the board, what you're basically saying is the draft is going to go with Herbert being the second pick, the second quarterback picks, and then Tua being the next one after him. So you're almost building on that bet a little bit there. So you could get a couple $100 depending on what site you're on, Herbert being the pick to Miami, the number 5 pick. And then you can still put another couple $100 on Tua being the next quarterback taken after him. Those two picks to me are basically correlated together. So if you can't get enough money down on one and you want to get extra money down, that's the way to go ahead and go about doing it, which I'm not going to lie to you guys. That's what I did as well. Basically just trying to say if it comes out that way, you're looking at turning 200 into 500, $300 profit, $200 back on Herbert as the 5th pick. And then you can put another 200 on Tua as the 6th pick. And I think it was plus 110 is what I got it at. So that's going to pay plus 110 would pay $420, $220 profit. So if you believe that, you could bet 400 and make a $900 profit on those two things. Am I crazy, or is that a good bet?
I personally think that's a good bet because, like you mentioned, these two picks are correlated with one another. And to me, it's going to be 2 and 3 regardless of the order. And we all think at this point the Dolphins are going Herbert. So if they're going Herbert and we think that these are going to be the top 3 quarterbacks taken off the board, and these two are 2 and 3, this is a really good correlated bet here.
Yeah. So, all right. So now we got through the first 6 picks here, right? This is where I think the draft could go in a bunch of different directions once we get here. Because now you're talking, Simmons, who we mentioned before. There's a couple D linemen, a couple other cornerbacks that might be up there. You got 4 or 5, you got 3 or 4 other offensive linemen who are going to be drafted here. And then we're going to start the run on all the wide receivers here. Now, a lot of our people who watch the show and a lot of the people who follow us and, Elite and all that are fantasy sports players. So they don't really give 2 shits about a lot of these defensive guys and a lot of these offensive linemen and stuff like that. And you know what? If you even look at the numbers that the companies are putting out for this draft, there aren't a lot of numbers on first D lineman off the board or second D lineman off the board after Chase Young or something like that. First linebacker off the board to get a piece of Simmons. Really from here, it goes to the wide receivers. So that's what I want to kind of talk about next with you guys. Once you get to like the Jets pick right there at like 11, this is when I think you're going to start seeing some of these wide receivers. And we talked about this being a deep class for offensive linemen. This is also a very deep class for wide receivers. There are arguably 10 guys in this class that in any other given year would get a first-round grade. But this year, you can't give all of them a first-round grade because there's not going to be 10 wide receivers picked in the first round. But let me ask you guys this question. The over-under on wide receivers picked in the first round right now is basically 6. So you can look at some sites you're getting under 5.5 at plus money, and then other sites have it 6.5, but you're getting under 6.5 at like basically even money. So they're basically considering 6 wide receivers being drafted in the first round. So let's start with that question first. How many wide receivers do you think get drafted in the first round? And do you think the fact that it's such a deep class means that after, we'll call it the big 4, really the big 3, and then I think Jefferson is included in there. So we'll say the big 4. So after the big four, do you think we get two more wide receivers drafted in the first round? Because I don't think we're going to get one between 0 and 10. So you're basically talking between pick 11 and pick 32, 22 picks. We're going to need 6 wide receivers for the over to hit on that. Do you think 6 of the picks between 11 and 32 wind up being wide receiver?
I'll go first. I think yes. I hit this line and the line was at 5.5. So like you said, we have that big four of Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, Justin Jefferson, and I think Jalen Reagor has moved himself into the back end round 1 conversation.
Okay.
Then we also have like a next tier of like Denzel Mims, Brandon Ayuk. I think those are the guys that are the question marks of do they land or not.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay at 30 is a good spot for one. The Saints could use a luxury pick at 24. We could see some slide in there, and I think the line's perfect, to be honest. It's just a really, really good line. We also have other guys that could slide their way in somehow, like Shenault, Higgins, Hamler. They're more likely going to be day 2 guys, but there's a possibility that these teams just don't want to miss out on these top end prospects.
What are you thinking?
I think it's a really stiff line because I think we're very, very close. I actually love the 5.5 that Tyler got, to be honest with you, because I think that's a spot on line. And when you look at some of these teams in the back, Minnesota has 2 late picks. They could use a receiver now that they don't have Diggs.
Right, they got
Green Bay can use a receiver. They're at the back end. You know, these are teams that can really. The Eagles are back there. They can use a receiver. Mm-hmm. I would not be surprised to see a run of receivers towards the end of this first round, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's why I think that 6 number is great. Like if you look at it, it's 5.5 in some spots with with the juice to the over, and then it's 6.5 in other spots where it's a little more like even money. I think 6 is a really good number. Like that's where it's going to wind up being. So I didn't take anything on the total number here, but let's get into some of the guys who could be the first one off the board. Looking at some of the numbers here, Judy and Lamb are both plus 110 right now to be the first wide receiver off the board. I think Judy was actually negative money, and Lamb was like plus 140. So the market's kind of coming back to the point where those 2 guys are basically a coin flip. And I think it comes down to which team is looking and what kind of wide receiver they want to need there. Ruggs is behind them at plus 300. Let's ask that question first. For you guys, Judy and Lamb, number 1 and number 2, or number 1 and number 1A is probably a better way to say it.
I think they're 1A, 1B, honestly. I think it really is depending on who. Like, so if if the Raiders are the first team that take a receiver, I think they go Lamb over Judy. If the Jets take a receiver there, I think they go Judy over Lamb. It's just really like
this was going to be my question. Go ahead, yeah.
You know? So that would be how I would foresee it. And then if the Raiders take Lamb, I would not be surprised to see San Francisco take Judy right after. I mean, that's how I would probably foresee it happening.
Yeah, I think that 11, 12, 13 level right there is where you're going to start seeing the wide receiver run. And honestly, you're probably going to have 4 of them come off the board between that pick and what's the Eagles, 20, I think. Tyler, you're a Philly guy, right? What are the Eagles, like 20?
21, yep.
Yeah, so I think by the time you get to the 21st pick, though, between 11 and 21, you're going to have 4 wide receivers come off the board, with the Eagles probably taking Jefferson there. If any of those other guys slide to the Eagles, I could easily see them, taking Ruggs, or God forbid if Judy or Lamb is there, they're gonna basically, Philly's gonna be creaming themselves right there. They're gonna be loving it if one of those things happens. But would you agree with Armando? It kind of comes down to who decides to start the run on wide receivers, who goes first, and if that's the case, can we even make any money betting on this, or is it really just crapshoot?
I think they're perfect fits with Jets going number 11, Raiders going number 12. Judy to the Jets makes the most sense just because of his versatility to line up anywhere. Whereas for the Raiders, they're looking for that outside alpha wide receiver 1. They wanted Antonio Brown to be that guy. CeeDee Lamb can definitely be that guy for them. I think they're just great fits there. At 15, the Broncos, Henry Ruggs makes so much sense to me there. Just so they have a field stretcher opposite to Cortland Sutton. They can let the safeties stop shading towards Sutton's direction and playing a little bit more honest. Then they have that ground game, Melvin Gordon, and everybody there that they've acquired. I like Denver to be a wide receiver selection. The wild card is San Francisco if they take they take a wide receiver at 13. That's one of the biggest question marks for me.
Now, let's say that does happen. I mean, if that happens, do you think we wind up easily getting to that over 5.5? Because like I said, the Eagles
Yeah.
really want a wide receiver too, and Denver wants a wide receiver. I mean, you could wind up having 5 wide receivers go between 11 and 21 if that's the case.
Absolutely, yeah. I could see them taking maybe Justin Jefferson. He slides up a little bit, LSU wide receiver. Then the Eagles take Jalen Reagor. Then we have Minnesota taking a wide receiver. We have
Well, at that point, we only need one more because now we're at 5.
Yeah.
So, I mean, between pick 22 and 32, you just need one of those teams to hop in on the wide receiver thing, and you get that over 6. You know, you would still
Right.
need 2 wide receivers to be taken at the back end to get that, to get that over 6.5 at even money, though. So,
Yeah.
I would be much more willing to go to a site like DraftKings and lay, like, I want to say it's like minus 180 or minus 190 to get that 5.5 number. But I feel really comfortable with the 6 number. Asking for 7 might be pushing it a little bit, especially in the draft where there's a lot of good offensive linemen, a couple quarterbacks that are going to go, and a lot of – I mean, we haven't even really talked about it, but there's a bunch of solid defensive players that people are going to be looking at too, some pass rushers, some defensive linemen, again, maybe only 1 or 2 good linebackers that could go in the first round. But you're always going to have probably 2 or 3 corners go in the first round one way or another just because of how important that position has become in the league right now. And, when you start adding all that together, there's only 32 picks in the first round. Like, they can only go to so many spots here. If you're putting 7, 8 wide receivers in the first round and 6 offensive linemen and 4 quarterbacks, I mean, you're basically saying there's only like 12 or 13 other players that are going to get drafted at every other position. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we got these, the 0 running back in the first round kind of thing being a hot bet right now.
I will mention one other thing. I did a Brandon Ayuk profile yesterday, and the under for 32.5, that's a spot, is juiced at 130, minus 130. The over is minus 110. So they're thinking that this is from, I think it was Bovada. They're thinking that Ayuk becomes a first-round pick. Just another reason to pick that 6 wide receiver spot.
And I see here's
what do you guys think about this bet, man? So the exact pick, it's plus 350, Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, and then plus 350, Lamb, Judy, Ruggs. Would you think of hedging both of them if that's really what we think? Those are going to be the first 3 receivers taken.
Does it have to be in order, or it's just those?
It has to be in order, but those would be Ruggs is going to be number 3 at all times. So it's you were just swapping. You're getting the same odds plus 350.
No, what I'm saying is like it doesn't have to be like 11, 12, 13. It could be like 11.
No. Like the first 3 receivers taken off the board. So there'll be Judy, Lamb, Ruggs. Yeah, I think that's a good bet.
I like that a lot. As a matter of fact, where is that at DraftKings?
Yeah, DraftKings.
All right, I got to go look at that. I like that a lot. Because, I mean, if you put 100 on both of them, it's going to pay 350 both ways. And I think, what would happen?
San Francisco is the only wild card, guys. That's really the only wild card, like Tyler mentioned. And I think if they go receiver, Ruggs makes sense.
Now, would you pick? What's the chances Jefferson goes ahead of Ruggs? Because again, everything I'm seeing has Ruggs ahead of him. But what do you guys think?
So
what's the scenario?
So Jefferson. Oh no, that's first receiver taken. No,
Jefferson's mostly a slot receiver, and I think with the way the 49ers are constructed, they're looking for a vertical field stretcher to open those rushing lanes. That's what makes Ruggs makes a little more sense there in that case.
So let's say the Jets decide, because they are the Jets, and me being a Jet fan, we do stupid shit.
Offensive line.
Let's say, and again, I wouldn't even mind if the Jets go. If the Jets go tackle, I'm fine with that too. But if they go tackle, then you're looking at probably Lamb to the Raiders, right?
Yeah.
Which would leave Judy to go to San Francisco.
I think that would be a slam dunk for them.
The rich get richer.
Yeah. The question that we're really asking right here is, what would Denver do? Would they go Ruggs?
They're going to go Ruggs. I think there's a lot of ties to Denver and Ruggs, in my opinion. I've read a lot, and I think that, if he's there, they're going to take him.
Yeah, I like that idea of doing $100 on each one. Plus 350 are really good odds.
Yeah, you're putting 100 to win 450, and you're going to lose 100 on the one that you lose. So you're walking away with a $250 profit on that. As a matter of fact, I may go do this. I didn't have anything on that right now. I may go put that down right now. I also saw something for anybody out there who has access to DraftKings Sportsbook. They're trying to get you to bet on this. They also are offering 20% boost on the payouts. Ooh. So if you can get plus 350 with a 20% boost on it as well, you're talking plus 420 right now. Oh, I have to do it now. That's a perfect number.
There you go.
You're getting plus 420 on both of these things right now. You got to go take it. The bet almost makes itself at this point. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go too. I like that a lot. So let me ask you guys this question: over under on the number of offensive linemen being drafted in the first round, 6.5. little bit of juice to the over too. So they're actually expecting even more at 7 or more to be drafted in the first round. What do you guys think of that number?
I think that's a bit high. I think we're going to see 4, maybe 5. Just think about what we just discussed. We've talked about potentially 3, 4 quarterbacks, 6 receivers. It's 10. You got some defensive players as well in the mix. I think it's pretty close, but I would take the under there, man. But I'm not confident about it though.
Tyler, you too?
Yeah, so I think we have those first 4 going in those top 15 or so picks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Josh Jones, tackle out of Houston, he's a wild card. I've seen him projected with a round 1 through round 3 grade. I think he's the guy that could be in there, but 6.5, I'm hitting that under.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Jones goes to Miami at 26.
That would be a good pick.
We know for a fact, or at least I'm going to assume for a fact, that you're going to get 4 within the first half of the draft. By pick 16, I think those 4 tackles are all going to be off the board. You know, who do we Wirfs, Wills, Thomas, and Beckley, whatever his name is. So those 4 are all going to be off the board. So really what you're asking is between pick 16 and 32, how many more do we get? I mean, you guys are both in love with Jones and thinking he's going to go first round here right now. So really what we're asking is, do we get 1, maybe 2 more or not? I think 6.5 is a little high. Let's say the number's 5.5. Do you touch that number over under?
I wouldn't be touching either, man. I would stay away from both of those bets because it's just, for me, it's too close.
Mm.
Yeah, we have some real wild cards at the end of the draft too, with the Patriots, the Saints, the Ravens, the Titans, the Chiefs. I mean, I think any of those teams could go in multiple directions, and that could really screw over a bet. But I would take the under 6.5. I wouldn't do the 5.5.
All right. So before we hop off here, let me ask you guys a couple other questions, and you tell me what you think of it. LSU versus Alabama players drafted in the first round. Alabama is the minus money. LSU is plus money. Alabama is minus money. Who has more players drafted in the first round, Alabama or LSU? It's going to be close. From what I'm looking at, like if you look at a lot of mock drafts and add them up, it basically comes out even or Alabama by 1 or 2 every time, like every different mock draft I looked at. Because I was like, oh, this has to be pretty easy. And I started looking through it. And then you realize, like, you know, the D linemen and the cornerbacks and, like, all these little guys that have a chance that could make it, that could sneak into the back of the first round, they're all from either Alabama or LSU. So depending on which direction a lot of those teams go towards the back end of the rounds, it could be really close here. I still lean Alabama here, but I wanted to get your opinions on it because I didn't bet on it yet, but it was one I was looking at.
I think it's even.
Yeah, I think it's even.
You'll be surprised when you start looking at the numbers just how even it really is. Like, there are 4 or 5 guys from both schools that you're like, oh, yeah, they're definitely going in the first round. And then there's, like, a whole bunch of those guys that are being talked about as, like, pick 25 to, like, pick 50 that are from those 2 schools where you're like, well, if they need to reach for this position or go to that position or go get this or go get that, you could easily see it kind of going either way. So I think that's an interesting bet to keep an eye on. Here's another one, though, with those 2 schools involved in it. SEC versus every other conference. Who has more draft picks in the first round?
SEC.
Yeah.
I mean,
literally the rest of the not like SEC versus every other like it's every conference is one
versus the field.
Yeah.
So it's like, are there going to be 17 SEC players drafted in the first round as opposed to 15 players from any other conference in the country?
I think between those 2 teams alone, you're going to see 8 to 10 in the first round.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. 10 minimum, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
When I did the numbers, yes, I think it was actually 12. Like,
yeah, it's up there. I mean,
where there's 12 players from those 2 teams are probably going to go in the first round. And then there's a couple other schools in the SEC that might get a guy or 2 in there as well to get there. So I thought that was a pretty interesting bet, though, that to just kind of show anybody who's an SEC hater, you know, basically there 32 guys getting drafted in the first round, and you're basically arguing that half of them are going to come from one conference. That's pretty freaking good.
Yeah, Georgia.
I think I would take that bet. I would take that bet.
Yeah. I mean, Georgia, like if you got guys like Swift and who's that? They had that one offensive lineman that everybody like you know.
Yep.
You start adding up the actual numbers, and you're like, my God, this is a real possibility that half the first round of the draft went to an SEC school here. Let me see what else I got written down here to get your opinions on. Oh, first running back off the board. So Swift is minus 155. Jonathan Taylor is plus 200. Not first round, just in general, first running back drafted. Swift minus 155. Jonathan Taylor plus 200.
I like Swift, but this is a situation where I don't hate either bet because they're really 1A, 1B. I mean, it just really depends on the team that decides to take the running back first, like what they're looking for in their running back.
Tyler, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be Swift. I 155. Those aren't terrible odds. I'd probably place a bet there, just because everything we've seen is indicating Swift's the guy.
You're basically getting 60 cents on the dollar. You bet 100, you get $60 back on it.
Yeah, I'd do that.
Yeah, I'm really tempted to take Taylor at the 2-1, but I kind of agree with you. I think Swift is the guy who's going to wind up being the first one off the board there. And then, like I said, you start looking at some of these offensive linemen here. Worst first offensive lineman off the board plus 200 to be the pick for the Giants plus 300. So if you're going that route, I kind of like that. So before we sign off here, here's what I want to do. With all the shit that we just talked about here today, if you're making one bet, your stimulus check came in today, you got some extra cash, you don't know what to do with it. Who should our watchers be putting their money on? Who's your favorite overall bet of all the ones that we talked about here today? What's the one place you want to put your money? Tyler, we'll start with you up top.
I guess it depends on the odds you can get. One I placed a while back was Jets and Judy. I think it was plus 200 at the time. Which I just think it's just such a good match right there.
Yeah, and you're probably going to get a better number on the Jets drafting Judy than you're going to get on Judy to be the first wide receiver off the board. But if the Jets, if he's the first wide receiver off the board, he's plus 110, you could probably get a better number if you look directly at who the Jets are going to pick and take Judy there if you're interested there. Armando, yours, favorite bet here for the NFL draft?
This is simply odds, and just because I can see this happening, Dolphins taking a linebacker with their first overall pick is plus 1,800. And if Simmons is there, man, I would not be surprised if they take him. So I would just a little bit, man, not too much. Don't overly invest in that, but you can make some pretty big money with very little investment there. So I like that bet a lot.
So 14 gets you 250 right there. You bet $14 on that, you get 250 basically at those odds. So
you don't have to invest your time.
I will put $14 on something to get 250 out of the back end of it as well. It would probably screw a lot of my bets though, because to me, again, I'm hearing a lot of stuff coming out here about Herbert going to Miami. So like I said, I maxed out that at plus 150 as opposed to, plus 105 or plus 110 as opposed to Tua at minus 150 being that pick. Now, again, I like Tua better. I think Tua has the better chance to turn into a superstar in this league. But it's not about who I like better or who I think is the better player. It's about who's going to get drafted. And to me, from everything I hear from Miami, when you start hearing all these beat writers who are legitimate beat writers, not some guy with a fucking blog and a Twitter account, when you hear legitimate beat writers that, that are covering the team and have covered the team, talking about that's what they want, it's probably because they've heard something from somebody in management. Last year, Daniel Jones was the same way. I thought it was crazy that the Giants were talking about taking him, but if you live in this area, I mean, it wasn't the first time I heard the story. They might have been shocked about him taking him on ESPN, but when we were reading the local newspapers, Daniel Jones was a name that was popping up a lot. So I'm a big believer in, kind of following the beat writers at this time of year, because they seem to have a lot better inside track record than some of the national media, especially when it comes to the thinking of some of these GMs here. So I like that Herbert pick at, plus 105 or plus 110 right there. I like the fact that you could back it up as well by taking Tua being the third quarterback off the board. So if that's something that you believe in, you can make both of those picks and get as much money down as you can. And then one that we talked about here on the show, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to add that plus 350 on the, Judy Lamb, Judy Lamb and Ruggs, and then Lamb, Judy, and Ruggs. Again, if you can get plus 350 on both of those, and you can do it on DraftKings with the 20% boost that they're offering now that I didn't get any bets on with yet, and I was looking for something to use it with, that's a really good way to do it, because it's very likely that it's going to come out one of those two ways there. And if you put 100 on either way, you're putting 100 to win 520, which means you make a 420 profit with a 20% boost. You lose 100 for the other bet. You bet 200, you walk away with 520, which is a $320 profit. That's not bad right there overall. So that's probably something I'm going to be looking into as well there. So for Tyler and Armando, this is Benny signing off for the NFL draft version of the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com.